The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's General Hospital buzzed like angry hornets above the trauma bay. A white-coated surgeon, veins bulging at his temples, reared his open palm and cracked it across the face of a black nurse whose supply cart had just clipped his heel. The slap echoed down the corridor, sharp as a gunshot, freezing every intern, orderly, and patient within earshot. Phones rose in trembling hands, capturing the moment in grainy 4K. The nurse, tall, braids coiled like armor, eyes unblinking, didn't flinch. Her cheek bloomed crimson, yet her arms stayed folded, spine straight as surgical steel. The doctor's smirk curdled the instant a low, authoritative voice cut through the stunned silence from the observation deck above. "Dr. Harlan!" The name dropped like a scalpel. Every head swiveled. There stood the hospital director, face carved from granite, staring down at the man who had just struck his only daughter. Harlan's hand froze mid-air, the ghost of the slap still tingling in his fingers. The nurse's gaze lifted, not to her father, but through the doctor. In that heartbeat, the hierarchy of the entire ward inverted, and the real emergency began. St. Mary's General sat in the heart of a city that prided itself on progress, yet its corridors still carried the faint scent of old hierarchies. Dr. Marcus. Harlan had ruled the surgical floor for 12 years, his name whispered with equal parts fear and reverence. Patients lived or died by the steadiness of his hands, and residents scrambled to avoid the lash of his tongue. He moved through the halls like a shark through shallow water, expecting the sea to part. Nurse Aisha Kensington had arrived 6 months earlier, fresh from a trauma fellowship in Atlanta. Her resume gleamed, valedictorian published research, disaster zone deployments. But to Harlan, she was just another pair of hands pushing a cart. He never learned her last name. He never needed to. She wore navy scrubs that matched everyone else's, kept her braids pinned tight, and spoke only when spoken to. In a hospital where black staff were often funneled into lower-paying shifts, Aisha's presence in the elite trauma unit raised eyebrows. Whispers followed her like shadows. Affirmative action hire? Quota baby diversity checkbox. Harlan repeated the phrases in private, savoring their bitterness. Aisha noticed everything. She saw how Harlan lingered over white residents' charts while snapping hers shut. She felt the extra seconds his gaze lingered on her skin when she handed him instruments. She absorbed the micro-dismissals, the way he pronounced her first name like a question, the way he assigned her the messiest cases. Each slight landed like a paper cut, shallow but cumulative. She kept a mental ledger, not out of pettiness, but survival. Her father, Dr. Leonard Kensington, the hospital's director, had warned her, "Earn it twice over, or they'll never let you earn it at all." Leonard had built his career brick by brick, from night janitor to chief of surgery to the corner office with the city skyline view. He'd insisted Aisha use her mother's maiden name on her badge. Kensington would open doors, but it would also slam them in her face. So she became Nurse Kensington to the system. But to the night shift phlebotomists and the cafeteria ladies, she was still Lenny's girl. They protected her with small kindnesses, an extra coffee, a heads up about Harlan's mood. She protected them in return, volunteering for the shifts no one wanted, covering when budgets cut overtime. The trauma bay that afternoon pulsed with controlled chaos. A multi-car pileup on the interstate had flooded the ER with broken bodies. Blood streaked the linoleum. Monitors screamed in overlapping symphonies. Aisha's cart, stocked with chest tubes, central lines, and crashed drugs, became her lifeline and her liability. She navigated the narrow aisles like a dancer, anticipating needs before they were voiced. Harlan, elbow deep in a lacerated spleen, barked orders without looking up. When her wheel grazed his Achilles tendon, the room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. His head snapped around, eyes wild with the adrenaline of a man who'd been waiting for an excuse. The slap wasn't spontaneous. It was the culmination of months of pressure building like plaque in an artery. Harlan had been passed over for chief of surgery the previous year. Leonard's quiet. Vito, citing leadership concerns. The slight festered. He compensated by tightening his grip on the residents, extending shifts until exhaustion blurred their vision. Docking pay for minor infractions. Aisha became his favorite target. Not because she she didn't, but because her competence threatened the narrative he'd built. That excellence required his specific brand of whiteness. 3 weeks earlier, she'd corrected him in front of a drug rep. He'd ordered the wrong dose of vasopressin for a septic patient. She'd caught it, sliding the corrected syringe into his hand with a murmur. The rep's eyebrows had lifted. Harlan's smile had frozen. Later, he'd cornered her in the supply closet. Voice low. "You think you're smarter than me because you read a pamphlet in some inner-city ER?" She'd stared back, silent, until he stormed out. The incident joined her ledger. The day of the slap, the trauma bay was a pressure cooker. Harlan had already lost one patient, a teenage driver whose aorta shredded despite his efforts. The defeat clung to him like sweat. When Aisha's cart rolled over his foot, barely a bump, the wheel catching the edge of his clog, he saw red. The room blurred. He pivoted, palm already swinging. The crack of skin on skin cut through the ventilator alarms. Time stuttered. Aisha's head snapped sideways, but her feet stayed planted. The sting bloomed hot across her cheekbone, a 5-fingered brand. Around them, the world narrowed to a tunnel. The metallic tang of blood, the squeak of sneakers on tile, the collective inhale of 20 witnesses. A junior resident dropped a tray of instruments. The clatter sounded like gunfire. Phones emerged slowly at first. 1, then 3, then a dozen. The red recording dots multiplied like a virus. Harlan's chest heaved. Triumph flickered across his face, quickly replaced by something uglier, recognition that the room had shifted allegiance. Aisha's eyes, dark and depthless, met his. No tears, no retreat, just a stillness that felt ancient. Behind her, the security guard who'd been flirting with a tech all morning stepped forward, hand on his radio. The guard's badge read, Thompson. He'd grown up 2 blocks from Aisha's grandmother. Up on the observation deck, Leonard Kensington had been reviewing budget reports. He'd come down to check on the mass casualty influx, a habit from his resident days. The slap reached him like a physical blow. He recognized the slope of his daughter's shoulders before. He saw her face, the same posture she'd held at 12 when a teacher accused her of cheating on a test. She'd aced. Leonard's pen clattered to the floor. He moved without thinking, descending the stairs 2 at a time, white coat flapping like a flag of surrender. Harlan sensed the shift before he heard the voice. The crowd parted instinctively. Leonard's presence filled doorways. It always had. But this was different. His eyes, usually warm with dad jokes and bedtime stories, had gone arctic. Harlan's hand, still raised, began to tremble. The nameplate on Aisha's scrubs caught the light. A. Kensington. The coincidence registered too late. The security cameras, 4 angles, high definition, had captured everything. One feed auto-uploaded to the hospital's cloud server. Another streamed live to a resident's private story. By the time Leonard reached the trauma bay threshold, the video had already pinged the phones of 3 board members enjoying Saturday brunch. Aisha finally moved. She reached up not to touch her cheek, but to adjust her stethoscope, as if the slap had been a minor inconvenience like a splatter of betadine. The gesture was so calm it felt violent. Harlan's mouth opened, closed. No apology formed. Instead, a reflex. She shouldn't have been in my way. The thought died unborn as Leonard's shadow fell across him. Leonard didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The trauma bay had gone quieter than a morgue. Even the ventilators seemed to hush. He stepped between his daughter and the man who'd struck her, close enough that Harlan could smell the peppermint on his breath. "Dr. Harlan," Leonard said, each syllable precise as a suture. "You are relieved of duty effective immediately." Harlan's laugh came out strangled. "You can't—" "She clipped me with the cart. It was an accident." "The cart," Leonard repeated, "has wheels. Your hand does not." He turned to the security guard. "Escort Dr. Harlan to HR. He'll surrender his badge and pager." The guard, Thompson, moved, with the reluctance of a man who'd once needed Harlan's signature for a loan. But Leonard's authority was older, deeper. Thompson took Harlan's elbow. The surgeon jerked away, face blotching purple. "This is retaliation," Harlan spat. "I've been here 12 years. She's been here 5 minutes. 6 months." Aisha corrected softly. Her first words since the slap. They landed like a gavel. Harlan lunged toward her, a reflexive twitch. Thompson caught his arm, twisting it behind his back with practiced efficiency. The struggle was brief, undignified. Harlan's white coat rode up, exposing the monogrammed cuffs of a shirt that cost more than Aisha's monthly rent. A resident snorted, then thought better of it. Leonard placed a hand on Aisha's shoulder, not protective, but grounding. She didn't lean into it. Her eyes stayed on Harlan as Thompson marched him past the crash cart, past the teenage driver now stabilized in Bay 3, past the cafeteria worker who'd slipped in to watch and was live streaming. To her prayer group, the doors to the staff elevator slid open. Harlan's reflection stared back at him, disheveled, wild-eyed, a stranger. As the doors closed, he caught one last glimpse of Aisha. She was already turning back to her patient, gloving up with the same steady hands that had once held her father's, while he cried over her mother's cancer diagnosis. Upstairs, the board convened an emergency. Zoom. The video had hit 50,000 views. Local news choppers circled the helipad. Harlan's personnel file, 3 prior. Complaints of hostile work. Environment, all mysteriously. Unresolved, surfaced like a body from a shallow grave. By Monday, Harlan's parking spot bore a new sign, reserved for electric vehicles. His office became a lactation room. The settlement, undisclosed but rumored at 7 figures, included a lifelong ban from practicing in the state. He left town before the ink dried, taking a locums gig in a rural county where no one asked questions. Aisha refused victim status. She declined the GoFundMe that raised $87,000 in 48 hours, redirecting donations to a scholarship for Black nursing students. The trauma bay renamed itself the Kensington Wing. Though she protested, the money came from Harlan's payout, and she wanted no part of his name. Instead, they installed a plaque for those who heal in the dark. Leonard retired the following year, earlier than planned. He spent his days teaching Aisha's scholarship recipients how to read a balance sheet and a bigot in the same glance. Father and daughter never discussed the slap directly. Some wounds close best without picking. The video lived forever online, clipped and captioned and debated in ethics classes. But the quieter changes mattered more. St. Mary's implemented mandatory bias, training not the checkbox kind, but role plays with actors who'd lived the slights. Anonymous reporting tripled, then quadrupled. A white resident who'd once laughed at Harlan's jokes now mentored a Black intern. Through her first thoracotomy, Aisha kept her mother's maiden name on her badge. She rose to trauma coordinator, then to director of nursing. On her first day in the role, she walked the same corridor where Harlan had struck her. The fluorescent lights still buzzed, but the sound felt different now, like possibility, not warning. By Monday, Harlan's parking spot bore a new sign, reserved for electric vehicles. His office became a lactation room. The settlement, undisclosed but rumored at 7 figures, included a lifelong ban from practicing in the state. He left town before the ink dried, taking a locums gig in a rural county where no one asked questions. Aisha refused victim status. She declined the GoFundMe that raised $87,000 in 48 hours, redirecting donations to a scholarship for Black nursing students. The trauma bay renamed itself the Kensington Wing. Though she protested, the money came from Harlan's payout, and she wanted no part of his name. Instead, they installed a plaque for those who heal in the dark. Leonard retired the following year, earlier than planned. He spent his days teaching Aisha's scholarship recipients how to read a balance sheet and a bigot in the same glance. Father and daughter never discussed the slap directly. Some wounds close best without picking. The video lived forever online, clipped and captioned and debated in ethics classes. But the quieter changes mattered more. St. Mary's implemented mandatory bias, training not the checkbox kind, but role plays with actors who'd lived the slights. Anonymous reporting tripled, then quadrupled. A white resident who'd once laughed at Harlan's jokes now mentored a Black intern. Through her first thoracotomy, Aisha kept her mother's maiden name on her badge. She rose to trauma coordinator, then to director of nursing. On her first day in the role, she walked the same corridor where Harlan had struck her. The fluorescent lights still buzzed, But the sound felt different now, like possibility, not warning. Years later, a new crop of interns asked about the plaque. Aisha told them the truth. Power isn't the hand that strikes. It's the one that refuses to strike back, yet still reshapes the room. She never raised her voice, never needed to. The scar on her cheek had faded to a faint line, visible only under certain lights, like a reminder that some battles are won by standing still. What happens when the person you tried to diminish turns out to hold the keys to your entire world? Sometimes the real emergency isn't the patient coding on the table. It's the moment you realize the hierarchy was never real, and the person you hit just rewrote it.